don't you think that the everyday man and woman has enough to pay for alongside these extra paywalls? Hello everybody and welcome back to Richmond Rovers. My name is Wes and today we're going to be doing something different, slightly away from football, but talking about the mainstream media versus digital platforms in relation to punditry. Now don't get me wrong, it's because of the mainstream media and digital platforms that I am actually doing this at the moment, because of being inspired by such shows as Match of the Day, Sky Sports, TNT Sports, as well as digital platforms such as The Rest is Football, The Overlap, Mark Goldbridge, etc. And I just wanted to throw in my 2 cents in relation to the debate at the moment between the mainstream platforms and digital media. It seems as though that there's a breakaway at the moment. We've already had such shows in the UK as Football Focus being cancelled, as well as mainstream platforms such as Sky Sports, TNT being overly expensive in this country for what many people, including myself, deem to be half a product. I know that Sky Sports has improved the overall game quantity in relation to Premier League streaming, but that doesn't necessarily improve the price tag that you have to pay for it, alongside TNT Sports, which I believe to be a complete rip-off up until the Champions League starts. And yet you have mainstream pundits, or formerly mainstream pundits, moving over to digital. And one example I wanted to talk about at the moment is The Rest is Football. Don't get me wrong, I love The Rest is Football. I think that the chemistry between Shearer, Micah Richards and Gary Lineker is incredible. And it's one of the reasons why I've started a YouTube channel. I mean, there's obvious differences in relation to them and me. For instance, they have many years within the broadcasting scene, as well as being professional footballers, as well as being multimillionaires, none of which I am, unfortunately. And yet on their most recent video, there has been a backlash between the fans, the hardcore fan base, in relation to their transition to Netflix. In case you didn't know, The Rest is Football did their World Cup coverage in New York. They were pretty much presenting daily shows on Netflix. When it came to analysis of the games, discussions about where England were going forward, you know, they threw in a darts competition which celebrities and footballers took part to see who could get the most points in the quickest time. But that sort of took away from the hardcore fan base from when they were just sitting at home in their living rooms or garages or whatever and just discussing the weekly events, whether or not it's like the Premier League, Champions League, FA Cup, Carabao Cup, etc. And let's face it, I'm going to be honest here, if Netflix, for whatever reason, knocked at my door and said, we're going to offer you multi-millions of dollars, pounds, whatever, for you to present your show on here, I'm going to take that because, you know, I'm just a rando. Whereas you've had the hardcore base of The Rest is Football being built on YouTube. You know, they had their quiz shows, which I've got a separate playlist just dedicated to that. I loved the quizzes that they did once a week. They did their analysis of certain players in the Premier League, such as Wayne Rooney, Eden Hazard, David Beckham, Eric Cantona. And you can just see the chemistry between the three are infectious. They obviously did their previous show, the Match of the Day Top 10, which is one of the funniest shows on BBC Sounds that I've ever heard, and it's still on there, so if you wanted to give that a listen, please do. But the controversy from them moving from Netflix after the World Cup and presenting their main podcast, where they're talking about the weekend's games and the Premier League on Netflix specifically, people do not like that because their hardcore base feels betrayed. I mean, take a look at all the comments here. RIP The Rest is Football, gone but never forgotten. Netflix robbed this beloved show from us. Once again, Netflix steals what we all love, football and boxing. No, I won't subscribe to the service. Man, I used to love this show. Who the listens to the show on Netflix? I never missed an episode when it was on YouTube. I subscribed to premium Netflix and watch maybe 1 in 5 now. So much less convenient on Netflix. Should have stayed green and stayed on YouTube. Have fun on Netflix with your corporate buddies. And I do understand the backlash because you've got Gary Lineker's podcast business, which is Goalhanger, which is a multi-million pound company who produces great podcasts, by the way. I'm not going to say that I dislike them. You've got The Rest is Politics with Alistair Campbell and Rory Stewart. You've got The Rest is History, The Rest is Entertainment, and of course The Rest is Football. And it's a brilliant podcast business. But I do understand that whilst the hardcore base on YouTube was built, as soon as Netflix came knocking and said, you know, we're going to fund this, of course they're going to go running off and just, you know, saying, you know, running off into the sunset, see you later, core fans, we're going on to Netflix, pay $12.99 for a standard service, $18.99 for premium. And don't you think that people like us have enough to worry about in relation to spending money? Now, I don't want to make this political here, but, you know, we've got the highest energy bills in this country's history, in probably Western Europe. I need to look at the statistic. Rents keep going up, subscription services keep going up. And yeah, you know, there is the dodgy Fire Stick argument. I don't really believe in that, simply because I think they buffer a hell of a lot and they are unreliable. And of course they're illegal, so, you know, I don't want to get myself into any trouble. But it's just another thing to pay for, and people aren't going to pay for it. I mean, you know, whether or not it's a political reason or whether or not it's just a saving money reason, people aren't going to pay for this. Like, don't get me wrong, I pay for Netflix, and, you know, myself and my wife use Netflix all the time for movies, for TV shows, and yeah, I'll be watching the rest of football on there if I'm paying for it. But you can definitely understand the reason why people aren't going to pay for it. Now, on a slightly different topic, another mainstream broadcaster now who was and has built their platform on YouTube, and he is still doing lots of YouTube stuff every day, and I really, really like this guy, is Mark Goldbridge. I won't lie and say that the main reason why I'm doing this and trying to build myself in this very, very overcrowded yet niche topic of YouTube football is because of Mark Goldbridge. I'm a Man United fan. Every week when it came to watch-alongs, I would watch the game and listen to Mark Goldbridge's commentary on it. From when he was a police officer all the way up to signing a multi-million-pound deal with Gary Neville's Overlap network. I find that to be truly inspiring, and it's something that I would, if I could have an eighth or whatever metric of his success, I would be happy with. But people say as well that he is a sellout in relation to joining up with Gary Neville's Overlap, selling the United Stand and That's Football to the Overlap network, and now putting on a show with Wayne Rooney every week on Disney+. Now, of course, there is a difference in relation to the Stick to United show, and that is that their main show is still on YouTube as well as Disney+. I know that they have different segments where it's like a YouTube members only segment, or whether or not that's on Disney+, I need to go and check. And that, of course, is different to The Rest is Football, because so far in the last 3 months, the only episode that they've put out is a Q&A episode that was just over 20 minutes long. And you can definitely see why there is an argument in relation to people consuming the digital platforms and moving forward into the mainstream. I think the biggest losers in this is the mainstream media, because you've already had a football institution like Football Focus being cancelled. There are talks about Match of the Day being switched off, and that would be a huge loss towards the British institution of the BBC in relation to football highlights. I remember, even, you know, I'm not exactly old, and I remember waiting until either 10:30 at night or waking up first thing on Sunday morning watching Match of the Day, because before all of the platforms such as Sky Sports, of which we could never afford in our household growing up, as well as like YouTube not being as big as it is now, that would be the only way to consume Premier League highlights each week. And it would be a huge shame for that, but you can see pundits such as Shearer Micah Richards, they're already on The Rest is Football. They have already got, maybe not their foot out of the door of Match of the Day, because I'm sure they're getting paid a hell of a lot of money to stay there, but you can see the gradual decline of mainstream platforms being taken over by digital platforms. Yeah, I understand that this is a bit of a ramble, but overall, what are your thoughts on mainstream versus digital platforms in relation to YouTube punditry? If the final game of a Saturday Premier League day kicks off at 5:30, it's going to finish at around just before 7:30, so they've got the 3-hour window between the final game finishing and Match of the Day airing. But before then, you've had things like the 12:30 kickoff, the 3 o'clock blackout, which I think is completely stupid and outdated. And yet within, say, 20 minutes of the game finishing, Sky Sports or TNT or whoever is putting out the highlights on YouTube, they've already got them there. And of course, the mainstream appeal of Match of the Day is not just the highlights, it's also the punditry, but it would be a real shame for Match of the Day to close down. I know this video has been a bit of a ramble, it's more of a discussion starter of what do you think of the mainstream media being declining in relation to football content and digital content rising up from the ashes and taking over to become the new mainstream. Comment below, let me know. Thank you so much for watching this video. I know it's been a bit of a ramble. I was watching the Rest is Football Q&A today, and it's just a discussion starter that I wanted to put across. Thank you so much for watching Richmond Rovers, and I will see you in the next video.